All right, everyone, welcome back. Today, we're going deep on some, well, let's just say unique sources.
Unique.
We've got this loan program specifically for human service providers here in New York City.
Oh, interest.
And D, we've got some federal contracting trends, but for small businesses.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Now, I know, you're probably thinking, what do those two things even have in common?
Yeah, at first glance, not much. Yeah.
Exactly. But stick with us. By the end of this deep dive, you'll be the one making all the connections, trust me.
I'm ready.
Okay, so first up, we got to talk about this Returnable Grant Fund.
The RGF.
The RGF, whatever.
Right.
But the second I saw interest-free loans, I was like, hold up, we got to look into this.
I mean, who wouldn't be interested in interest-free loans?
Exactly. But, got to be a catch, right?
Well, let's see. So our sources here, we've got some official documents, looks like, from the Mayor's Office of Contract Services.
Oh, fancy.
Yeah, and even an application form.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very efficient.
So it seems these loans, they're designed to help human service providers here in NYC.
So, like, the organizations that are providing, what, essential services to New Yorkers?
Exactly. Healthcare, housing assistance, food assistance.
Yeah, the important stuff.
And it's for both nonprofits and for-profits, which is interesting.
Oh, both. Huh. Okay.
Yeah, so think of it as a bridge loan,
Bridge loan. Okay, explain that to me.
Like, let's say an organization, they're waiting on a contract
Mm-hmm.
to be finalized, or maybe a grant payment, something like that.
Happens all the time.
Right. But in the meantime, they've still got to pay their staff.
Right. The bills don't stop coming just because the contract is delayed.
Exactly. Got to keep the lights on, all those program expenses, so that's where RGF comes in.
Okay, makes sense. It's like when you're waiting for your paycheck, but the bills are still due, except this is about, like, keeping those vital services running, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
No disruption of services, that's the
Well,
key.
okay, back to the interest-free part. How does that actually work? Like, who's really paying for it?
So this is where it gets clever, from what I'm seeing.
Okay, lay it on me.
The city agency, the one that's contracting with the service provider,
Mm-hmm.
they're actually the ones responsible for repaying the loan.
Really? So it's like once the contract is all squared away and the organization can start, like, sending invoices,
Exactly.
then the agency just pays back the RGF.
That seems to be the gist of it, yeah.
Huh. That's actually pretty smart, like
Yeah.
a built-in safety net.
To keep those essential services running.
Even when there's all that, bureaucratic red tape.
Yeah, gotta love bureaucracy.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But, okay, this also makes me wonder.
That's that.
What if these organizations could secure more stable funding from the start,
Interesting thought.
Like, wouldn't that make programs like this RGF even more effective?
Potentially, yeah. Less need for those bridge loans in the first place.
Right, exactly. Which brings us to our second source.
The federal contracting stuff.
You got it. Now, stay with me here because I know it seems totally unrelated.
Yeah, different worlds almost.
Right. But there's a connection brewing here, I promise.
I'm all ears.
So, according to this press release, straight from the SBA.
The Small Business Administration.
Yeah, small businesses are getting a bigger slice of those federal contracts than ever before.
Really? That's great to hear.
Like, we're talking, okay, I'm with you so far, but how does this all connect back to the RGF and those human service providers in New York?
The big question. Remember how we were talking about more stable funding sources?
Yeah.
Well, guess what? A lot of these human service organizations, they are small businesses.
Oh, right.
They rely on all sorts of funding, including, you guessed it, government contracts.
Wait, hold on. I think I'm starting to see it.
The connection.
Yeah, if more small businesses, including those human service providers, can get those federal contracts, they become less reliant on city funding.
Potentially.
Which means programs like RGF become even more effective.
It's like a positive feedback loop.
My mind is blown.
We're just getting started.
So we've got New York City stepping up with these innovative loan programs.
Right.
And then the feds are making a real effort to empower small businesses.
Interesting how it all comes together.
But what does it all mean for the actual services being provided?
Good question.
And how does it impact, everyday New Yorkers?
That's what we're going to explore next time.
So stay tuned for part 2 of this deep dive.
It's going to be a good one.
We'll uncover even more connections, so don't miss it.
See you then. All right, welcome back. We're picking up right where we left off, exploring this really interesting intersection of local and federal initiatives.
Yeah, we've laid the groundwork, right? New York City's got that RGF program helping to keep those essential human services up and running.
Right, that bridge loan program.
Exactly. And then we've got the feds pushing to give more contracts to small businesses.
Trying to level the playing field.
Totally. But now I'm really curious about, like, the actual impact of this.
The impact of what specifically?
Well, if these organizations, especially the ones providing human services, if they get more federal funding, could that lead to, like, innovation? New programs expanding existing services?
It's certainly possible, but...
Or maybe it could even shift the focus away from things that the city usually funds.
That's a good question. It's definitely something to think about.
Yeah, like, how does this all play out in practice?
Well, it's important to remember, we're not just talking about a general increase in funding across the board.
Right. It's not like every small business is suddenly getting a windfall.
Exactly. The data from the SBA press release, it actually breaks it down by different categories of small businesses.
Oh, interesting. So there's nuance there.
A lot of nuance. And that's where things get even more interesting.
Okay, I'm all ears. Break it down for me.
So, for example, small disadvantaged businesses.
Okay.
They received a record $78.1 billion in prime contracts.
Whoa. That's a lot.
It is, and it's a significant jump from the previous year.
So is that part of the Biden-Harris administration's focus on equity and inclusion?
I think it's safe to say that's a contributing factor. They've been very vocal about that.
It's one thing to talk about it, but it's another to actually see it happening.
Right. Actions speak louder than words.
Exactly. So what about women-owned small businesses? Are they seeing similar gains?
Definitely. They also saw a notable increase, hitting $31.68 billion in prime contracts.
Wow, that's great to hear.
And it's not just those two categories. Pretty much every category tracked saw an increase.
So it really seems like a widespread effort to empower diverse small businesses.
That's the takeaway here for sure.
And this all ties back to our earlier conversation about the RGF, right?
How so?
Well, if more small businesses, especially those owned by women and minorities, if they're winning these federal contracts, they become more financially stable, less reliant on city funding.
Exactly. They might not even need those bridge loans from the RGF in the first place.
So it's a win-win. It strengthens the small business ecosystem and the social safety net here in New York.
It's a great example of how local and national initiatives can work together, create a more resilient system.
Yeah, it's like a ripple effect.
Exactly.
But, I also have to wonder about the potential challenges.
What do you mean?
Well, even with all these streamlined processes, those new online tools the SBA keeps talking about, navigating the federal contracting world, it's got to be incredibly complex, especially for smaller organizations.
It's definitely not easy. There's a lot of red tape, a steep learning curve, for sure.
Yeah, and even if an organization does manage to secure a contract, there's the whole challenge of actually fulfilling those obligations.
Oh, absolutely. Winning the contract is just the first step.
Right. You got to deliver. And we want to make sure the quality of those services doesn't suffer in the process.
That's a crucial point, and it's not always easy to balance those things.
So complexities and potential pitfalls, even with all these positive trends.
That's the reality, for sure.
What are some other, questions or concerns that come to mind as we're analyzing all this?
Well, one thing that stands out to me is the question of equitable access.
What do you mean?
Well, are these programs actually reaching all the intended beneficiaries? Are there still barriers preventing certain groups from accessing these opportunities?
Oh, that's a really good point. Even with all the efforts to level the playing field, there could still be systemic issues.
Exactly, and it's something we need to pay attention to, make sure those programs are truly accessible to everyone.
And I guess we also have to think about the long-term sustainability of all this.
Like, what happens if funding priorities change?
Right. Or if the economy takes a downturn, are these programs designed to adapt and evolve as things change?
Those are big questions, and honestly, we don't have all the answers right now.
But it's important to ask those questions, to be critical even when things seem positive.
Absolutely. Celebrating the wins while also acknowledging the complexities, that's how we move forward.
Well said. And that actually leads us perfectly to our final source for this deep dive.
The RGF loan application form.
You got it. This is where we get down to the nitty-gritty, the nuts and bolts of how this program actually operates.
The rubber meets the road, so to speak.
Exactly. I'm fascinated to see what this application form reveals, the details, the fine print.
Sometimes those seemingly small details can tell you a lot about how things work in the real world.
Absolutely. So let's dive in. What are some of the things that jump out at you as you're looking at this form?
Well, one thing that's immediately clear, It's the level of detail they require.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's not just a quick form where you check a few boxes. You got to provide a very detailed breakdown of expenses.
Like specific payment dates, amounts, that kind of thing?
Exactly. It's not enough to just say, hey, we need some money. You got to demonstrate exactly how those funds will be used.
Yeah, it makes sense. They want to make sure the money's being used responsibly, right?
Oh, absolutely. Accountability is key.
It's good for the taxpayers and for the organizations themselves, knowing there's oversight.
Transparency is always a good thing.
Definitely. So what else are we seeing in this application form? Any other interesting details hiding in the fine print?
Let's see. Oh, this is interesting.
What's that?
It specifically mentions that the city agency, the one with the contract, they're the ones who kick off the loan repayment process.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so once the organization's contract is all set, they can start invoicing. Then the agency steps in and settles up with the RGF.
So it's like it takes the burden off the organization.
In a way, yeah, less for them to worry about.
And it ensures the loan gets repaid quickly.
Right, no chasing down payments or anything like that.
That's a smart system.
Streamlined, efficient, I like it.
Me too. I'm also noticing they've outlined very specific categories for what those expenses can be.
Oh yeah, what are they?
Payroll, rent, utilities, even supplies.
Makes sense, the essential operating costs.
Right. It seems like they've really thought through what organizations might need when they're in that, temporary funding crunch.
Covering all the bases.
And there's even a category for startup costs.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's not just for established organizations.
Nope. This program can actually help brand new organizations get off the ground.
Huh. Like a seed funding opportunity.
Exactly. Specifically for human services providers. Pretty cool, huh?
It is. Fostering a whole ecosystem of organizations.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some of the big takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I think the biggest one is these seemingly separate things, local initiatives, federal programs, they can have a huge impact on each other.
We saw that, right?
It's all connected.
Like supporting small businesses at the federal level, it actually strengthens the social safety net right here at home.
That's the key takeaway, for sure.
And it shows we gotta think bigger,
Beyond just individual programs or policies, look at the whole system.
Sometimes the best solutions, they come from these unexpected connections.
It's about seeing the forest, indeed the trees.
I like that. And I think it's also important to remember, even with the best intentions,
Right.
there can still be challenges.
Oh, for sure. Complexities, unintended consequences, things we haven't even thought of yet.
Which is why we got to keep asking questions,
Always be critical, even when things look good on the surface.
Exactly. That's what this deep dive is all about, right?
Unpacking the details, understanding the nuances.
So we've covered a lot of ground today. The RGF program, those federal contracting trends, the potential impact right here in New York City.
We explore the good, the bad, and the complicated.
And hopefully we spark some curiosity in our listeners.
I hope so. There's always more to learn.
We encourage you to check out those source documents yourselves. The links are in the show notes.
See what other connections you can make.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, keep those deep dives going.
Absolutely. Until next time.
Catch you all on the next deep dive. See ya.